Hey, this is Carey again. In this episode of the Christian Home and Family Podcast, I want to talk to you about something I call purposeful parenting. You know, you might think you're being purposeful, but are you really? You know, as parents, we've got to be honest. Parenting is one of the hardest things we've ever done. It doesn't come with an instruction manual. You usually didn't have a great example growing up, although your parents may have done a pretty good job. But most of us don't really understand that parenting is a thing in which you've got to be purposeful. You've got to be proactive. That doesn't mean you make sure your kid brushes their teeth, although that is important. What it means is you have got to be proactive in finding out what is really going on in the inside of your child's heart, what's really happening in their thoughts and in their attitudes and in their feelings. And you know, those kinds of things really take a lot of hard work. The scriptures lay out patterns like this for us, but it doesn't specifically talk about it in terms of parenting. But because we're believers in Christ and because we're leading our children to be believers in Christ, they apply because there are principles that teach us how to deal with one another as believers. Here's an example. Hebrews 3:12-13 says, "Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. But exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin." Now notice that first phrase, take care, brothers. Take care. Some versions of the Bible say, see to it that there's none of you that has a sinful, unbelieving heart. See to it. What does that mean? It means you have a responsibility as a believer in Christ to be proactive in the life of your Christian brother. And if that's your children, don't you think that responsibility is multiplied? So what does it take to do that? Well, it takes conversation. It takes questions. And I'm not talking about the interrogation kind of questions. I'm talking about true heartfelt concern for your children. Asking questions about what's been going on in their thoughts, what they're thinking about this or that, how they've been feeling about a situation that you know is going on at school. You don't want to wait for a situation to arise and erupt to the surface, because by then your child's already been dealing with it internally and things have been going on that could be developing bad habits, wrong attitudes, or even hard feelings towards God. And you don't want that. You've got to be purposeful. You've got to be proactive. Now, the verse also says, see to it that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from God. So we need to ask questions about faith. What's going on in their heart regarding their thoughts about God? Are there any of those hard questions that you're afraid to talk about that they really need to talk about? Is there a God? Why does God allow suffering? Why did God let this happen in my life? Those are the kinds of questions that happen in your child's heart and mind because they happen in your mind. That's how you know it. And so you've got to be proactive. Take the time to make sure you know what's going on in your child's heart. And that last sentence of the verse says, exhort one another daily, as long as it's called today. And there's a very important reason for that, so that none of you is hardened by sin's deceitfulness. Now, exhortation, we tend to think of exhortation as a negative thing where it's being critical or harsh, but that's not what exhortation is. Exhortation is spurring someone toward a better direction or toward a better outcome. It's raising their sights to be able to look at something in a different light, in God's light. Now, parents, I know this is difficult because it's different with every child. Personalities differ. The way they look at life differs. It's hard work. But nobody ever said parenting was going to be easy. We've got to be purposeful in our parenting. The Christian Home and Family Ministry is geared toward equipping you to build a legacy of faith that lasts in your family for generations. I hope that this podcast has been helpful toward that end. If you can help us out by leaving a review and a rating on iTunes, I would really appreciate it. You can find out how to do that at christianhomeandfamily.com/iTunes.